In August of 2021, I took a road trip across New York State in search of relaxation and cast iron. And one place I visited in the cast iron treasure hunt was the Madison Bouckville Antique Week. This event takes place outside of Syracuse in New York, and at its peak it has nearly 2,000 vendors. I'd learned a lesson in previous antiquing excursions, which was why I planned on arriving at the antique fair by 7 a.m.
You have reached your destination.
I knew there would be a few vendors opening at the crack of dawn. However, what I hadn't expected was that it had been raining all week and the entire area was covered with mud. All of the cast iron I saw there had a light coating of rust because of a week of rain, though that still didn't prevent me from seeing some interesting sights. In the morning, everything was still soaked and covered in water, though these were what the vendors considered less valuable items. Everything's wet, but not a bad way to start. And start off with a Wagner 1891. There were vintage items of all kinds on display, and I even got a glimpse of a sign from a vendor who I knew had been to Brimfield many times before. I do believe I recognize that sign from Brimfield. That's all right. I know it's a little cloudy. '60s, 1970s lodge, huh? Things were just beginning to get going, and I took my time seeing the sights and letting things catch my eye, and there certainly were a lot of those. Of course, most of the items there weren't cast iron, though there were a number of cast iron pots and pans to be seen there. Many were quite common for vintage items, but there were a few rare items as well. Definitely rained last night. These kettles are all over the place, and I haven't been here very long. It didn't take long for my shoes to be stained with mud, and even now, 2 weeks later, the stains haven't come completely off. Looking back, I actually regret not picking up this apparently unmarked Griswold ashtray for $10. I get this one. 70, huh? Oh, that's one, of course. By this point, I was used to everything being covered in water and looking rather rusty. Today happened to be the first day where it wasn't raining, and I think everyone was just relieved about that. BS&R cornbread skillet. No price tag. I'm wrong. Fudge. Should have recognized that because of the hole in the center. My bad. This was one of the most amazing items seen there, and it did look rather familiar as well. By now it was between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and most of the vendors were opening for business. A lot of items had been uncovered, and there were things to be seen everywhere. What's more, the sun was coming out, and everything was finally beginning to dry off, and I know that made a lot of people happy. Yes, all right. Looks sensual. And it was here that I came across the one item that seriously tempted me. I'd been looking for a Red Mountain number 14 skillet for a while, though the $165 price seen here still seemed too high. I considered trying to haggle the seller down to 100, but in the end I decided against it. That was largely because these pieces had been cleaned with a wire wheel. Ugly. If there was one thing to be seen at this antique fair, it was that nearly all of the cast iron was quite expensive and usually overpriced. There were more mom and pop vendors and fewer professional vendors here, yet they were still pricing their cast iron like you would see it on eBay. Even unknown pans were selling for prices that were often ridiculous. Here was one cast iron vendor who had protected his pieces from the rain, and they were all beautiful to look at, and each pan had a hefty price tag to go with the professional look.
Everybody let me know, questions, offers, all that, you know?
Thank you.
We're willing to deal. I don't know what tomorrow's gonna be. And I already know what the rest of the week's been.
Because I know I've seen you at Brimfield before.
Yeah, he set up in Sternvins. Yeah.
This was a deal I seriously would have considered if I didn't live in such a small apartment. By now the sun had come out and my shoes were dry, though still stained. However, there was supposed to be a storm coming by 3 p.m., so I only had a couple of hours left. Still, the weather was sunny and hot, and everyone was determined to make the most of it while they could. And here at last I came back to the sign I'd seen earlier this morning. The cast iron pieces here had been buffed and polished almost to a mirror finish.
I have some pictures of them going up and
We got our phones.
Decent prices, too. By this time, however, the storm was approaching, and I had to head out. I'd actually only purchased a few small pieces, but that didn't mean it was a wasted trip. Just seeing all of these amazing cast iron pieces made this a fun and fulfilling day, and it certainly made this part of my road trip well worth the time. The Madison Bouckville Antique Week takes place twice each year, and if you're interested in finding cast iron or just about anything else, you certainly won't be disappointed if you take the time to head out to Syracuse for this event. I only bought a few small pieces myself, but that's mostly because I already have a decent-sized collection. One vendor managed to talk me into purchasing 2 number 8 size pans, a Wagner, and a 3-notch Lodge, and he didn't even know what the Lodge was. In fact, he sold me a package deal on these 3 pieces, even though he only knew the Wagner name. Meanwhile, I also found these 2 John Wright baking molds, which I'll be cleaning up and using in a giveaway here on my channel.